Join ForumIAS Academy, trusted by hundreds of toppers, including IAS Rank 1 Shruti Sharma.
Okay, so in this series, I'm going to pick some troublesome questions that have been asked by UPSC, and I'm going to discuss them. Okay, one such question that I found candidates facing some trouble in answering precisely as to what should be written in response to the question was this. That is the question that appeared in 2021 PSIR optional paper. And the question is not troublesome at all, but yes, it is not direct. So the question is on Rawls' theory of justice. It is from the syllabus that is written in your notification, where it has been mentioned in paper 1 section A, that is conception of justice with special reference to Rawls' theory of justice and its commentary and critique. So that is the syllabus. Now what UPSC has been doing, that previously it has been asking questions from this section which have been very direct. So for example, you were asked to comment on wheel of ignorance, or then original position. Then they also asked a question on discuss the principles of justice as elaborated by Rawls. Also a direct question on commentary and critique, which have been provided by various scholars like Michael Walger, Michael Sandel, Charles Taylor, and many others. But now this question is not a direct question. This is not a direct question which is asking you to comment on wheel of ignorance or original position. This question actually tests your understanding about the context in which Rawls proposes his idea of justice. Okay, because if you are not clear about the context, then you will not be able to appreciate. Just read the question. How has Rawls enriched the idea of justice in liberalism? So here, that debate also needs to be discussed, and remember that this is a 20-marker question. So that debate also needs to be discussed, or at least a reference needs to be given, which actually relates to the context in which Rawls enter into the debate of justice. Because there, Rawls scrutinizes the conception of justice that prevailed in his time under the larger umbrella of liberalism, then identifies the problem and then seeks to rectify that, okay, through his own conception of justice. So what is that context? That context needs to be given, if not in the body, then at least in the introduction, because then only you can show that how Rawls has enriched the idea of justice. Okay, so what is the context where Rawls enters into the debate of justice? Context is the conception of, or you can say, utilitarian conception of justice. Okay, now utilitarian conception of justice emerged to counter, or you can say in response to the criticism of liberal procedural conception of justice that became obsessed with individual rights. Okay, so before we talk about answer of this question, just understand this, that you have seen two different conceptions of justice. One is procedural and the other is substantive. Okay, justice as the balancing idea seeks a reconciliation among different conflictual values, but one conception of justice differs from the other in the sense that while it seeks to reconcile the different conflictual values, for example, liberty and equality, a conception of justice presupposes any particular value to be an ultimate value. So these two conceptions of justice, that is procedural and substantive, also differ in terms of the value that they consider to be ultimate. Because if it is justice, a conception or a principle of justice, by all means, it will seek reconciliation among different conflictual values. Actually, this is precisely that balancing aspect of justice, which is actually personified, or you can say the symbolizes that personified figure of justice, in which a blindfolded lady holds a balance in her hand. So that aspect of justice is balancing aspect. But even while it seeks reconciliation, it presupposes any particular value or virtue to be an ultimate virtue. So procedural conception of justice that emerged under the larger umbrella of liberalism considers liberty to be ultimate virtue. And substantive conception of justice, more famous in socialist camp, considers equality to be ultimate virtue. And there in procedural conception of justice, all that boils down to the fact that you have to provide formal equality, or at least this much arrangement in the society must be made to establish justice, that is formal equality. And formal equality in most simple terms can be understood to be political equality. Okay? Which essentially means that people are equal in terms of their say in political affairs. That means the political worth of every individual is same. They cannot be discriminated on the basis of certain ascriptive identities, be it caste, creed, religion, or any such identity, any such marker of identity. Okay? Now, formal equality, where political worth of every individual is same, actually envisages for a system whereby there is no privilege, or there are no sets of privileges endowed upon any section of society because of certain ascriptive marker. Okay? No special rights. Okay? And to establish that, procedural conception of justice talks about equality of opportunity. Equality of opportunity. Okay? So, as I said, that this emerged and flourished under the larger umbrella of liberalism. So, protecting or ensuring the formal equality, envisaging for equal political worth of individuals, necessitated the system to provide for equal opportunities. Okay, equal opportunities. And thus, it also safeguarded the individual rights. Okay, because the ultimate value is liberty. Okay, so this is something that you already might be knowing, one of the basic conception of procedural conception of justice. Substantive is more radical in the sense that it is not satisfied only with the equal political worth of individuals. It is not satisfied only by providing equal opportunities. So it goes further to ensure that along with equal opportunities, there should be equality of outcomes also. Okay. It is also substantive in the sense that it is not the political equality which is being sought after here, but along with political equality, people need to be equal also in terms of social and economic aspect. So, substantive conception of justice talks about substantive equality, not just formal equality or political equality. It talks about socio-economic equality. Now, as you might have seen that socialism, this very school, provided, or you can say, it stood as a great challenge in opposition to liberal idea. And to a good extent, it succeeded in making a large section of society realize the negative ramification of liberalism. Okay, and there, the response that emerged from the liberal camp was acknowledging the lacuna in liberalism, that was the preoccupation with individual rights. तो इसमें हुआ क्या कि now a rectification was being made under liberal camp by utilitarians who acknowledged that yes, this preoccupation with individual rights is not correct. So we need to go beyond individuals, because emphasis on individual rights has brought about a situation whereby a large section of society is being exploited. Okay? Keeping liberty as a central virtue or value over others has created a system whereby a large section of society is being exploited. Okay? The very point of reference which is going to be picked up by Karl Marx, and then he will provide his own theory, his own interpretation. Okay? Something that we will talk about in some other question or in some other concept. Now see, that when utilitarian conception of justice emerged, it is to be remembered that this emerged under the larger umbrella of liberalism only. But what it rectified was this problem precisely, that is the preoccupation with individual rights. Okay, so when the scrutiny of ethics, the test of morality, shifted from liberty or individual rights to the maximum happiness for the maximum number of people, then that preoccupation or obsession with individual rights ended. Okay, so what was just or fair according to utilitarians? Any system, any policy, any law which delivers maximum happiness for the maximum number of people is just, it is fair. Okay, so that is a utilitarian conception of justice. In most basic terms, you know about Bentham, then James Mill and others who came out with this conception, which went beyond the individual, the confines of individual rights, and that preoccupation, the problem of preoccupation or obsession with individual rights, that got rectified. Now the second thing was this, that this conception of justice, that is utilitarian conception of justice, is a progressive departure. It is a forward departure, okay, in the right direction. But still, what utilitarian messed up, a very important thing. The moment when they justify any policy or any action, any legislation to be fair, to be just, because it is delivering the maximum happiness for the maximum number of people, they are ignoring minority. Okay? So here, in this particular context, Rawls enters into the debate, and he is going to provide his own principles of justice, and thus he enriches the idea of justice. But that is not all about this question. Okay? So he enters into the debate here. In this context, it is the context of that particular reference has to be made in the answer. Okay, it is important for one to write this particular reference while elaborating on this particular question, because if you do not understand the context in which Rawls enters into the debate, then you have not been able to appreciate the contribution of Rawls. Okay? Now, Rawls is coming from liberal camp only, but he is not going to be satisfied with this ethical scrutiny that utilitarians have proposed, that if you are able to deliver the maximum welfare or the maximum happiness for the maximum number of people, then the justice is said to be done. No, he opposes that. But before opposing it, before countering it, he acknowledges that how utilitarians have contributed in a positive manner and how it is a progressive departure from the obsession of liberalism with individual rights. So firstly, he acknowledges that yes, utilitarians' contribution in this regard is to be acknowledged. It is a progressive departure. Okay, it is progressive departure because it is not just preoccupied with individual rights. Okay, it is not satisfied just with safeguard that has been provided to individual rights. It goes beyond that and talks about majority. But Rawls claims that even then, utilitarian conception of justice is a flawed idea. Now, why it is a flawed idea? A liberal countering another liberal conception on the premise that in the utilitarian conception, the welfare of minority has been sacrificed for the sake of majority. And that is something which goes against the Kantian conception of justice. It seems as if the interest of minority has been sacrificed for the sake of majority, and minority has become a mean for majority. Now, that goes against the very maxim of Kant, whereby he says that no man can become a means for the end of other man. Okay, so he's inspired by Kantian conception of justice, and then he comes out with more egalitarian conception of justice. His idea is that each individual, and this is a very famous statement by Rawls that needs to be remembered, that each individual has inviolability that is founded over the principle of justice, that the welfare of whole society cannot override the loss of freedom of some for the greater good of many. That means he is not ready to sacrifice the welfare of even a single individual, even if that sacrifice delivers the welfare for the whole society. Now, if that is happening, that is equivalent to making that individual the mean for the end of whole society. That is not acceptable to Rawls. So there he comes out with his own principles. But when he comes out with his own principle, it is not just the enrichment by countering the utilitarians. You must also address in this answer that how he claims to be deontological in his approach. Okay? He claims that he does not have any conception of justice which has been preconceived. Okay? He does not prefer any conception of justice over the other just because he considers it to be good. He has just followed what is right to do, or the right course of action, and then he arrived at the certain principles. Okay? And in order to prove that he is not biased towards any particular conception of justice, he is not biased towards any conception of good in his mind, but only the right course of conduct that he actually subscribes for, he uses these heuristic devices called wheel of ignorance and original position. So original position, ye sari basic cheezein hain, you already might be knowing. I'm just saying that how you have to show that in the answer. So firstly, you provided the context in which he interested in the weed, and now the context, after providing the context, you are ready with this description that how Rawls is enriching the idea of justice. Because understand, it is not just about elaborating the principles that he has given in his theory of justice in 1971. It is not just about that. You have to show in the answer that how that has enriched the idea of justice. So without providing the context, it will not be correct to talk about his principles. Okay, now another thing that why I'm emphasizing on this, that his deontological venture is also needs to be emphasized to show that how he has enriched the idea of justice. This is also important, just like the context is important. This is because here he claims, and that claim has stood the test of many scrutinies, that he is not biased towards or against any conception of good or any conception of justice. He does not consider them to be good or bad. Okay, he has just followed the right course and then he arrived at those principles. And to show his unbiased attempt, to show that his whole venture has been deontological, he uses the heuristic devices original position and wheel of ignorance. So original position is a device that is equivalent to state of nature that you have seen in social contractarians, and wheel of ignorance is actually another heuristic device whereby he shows that how people behind the wheel of ignorance, when they stand in original position, do not know about their social, political, economic status. They have the basic knowledge of economics, psychology. They also have the conception of good. They also have this knowledge that society is going to reward the hard labor. And then he elaborates on the principles of justice. So that is something that you can go on doing after that. So firstly, you will discuss the liberty principle, then equality principle. Under equality principle, you will discuss that how inequalities are accepted only when they are attached to those public offices which are open to all. And then you will talk about difference principle, that inequalities are acceptable only when they are beneficial. They are to the greatest benefit of the most disadvantaged section of society. Okay, so that is the context, and then his deontological, his claim that he has been deontological throughout, and to substantiate his claim, he uses those devices, and this is the enrichment. Okay, this is the enrichment. Now understand that how he has been cautious with respect to egalitarian aspect, or with respect to egalitarianism that justice needs to establish, by not sacrificing the liberal aspect. Okay, and that is why you call Rawls to be liberal egalitarian, because he did not sacrifice the value of liberty. Okay, remember that in his three principles that any would have elaborated in response to this question, which are to be applied in lexical order. The first principle is liberty only. Okay, most extensive form of liberty, which is to be made available to all. Okay, so first principle is liberty only, but he is also taking care of this egalitarian aspect. Okay, now he is not, you can say, coming. Or he's not copying, or he's not trying to establish the substantive conception of justice that you have just seen. That because he does not stand for radical equality. On one occasion, he has went on to say, that inequalities in the societies are not something which must be opposed to thin nail. Some kind of inequality, some absolute equality is not something which is, you can say, practically possible. And he went on to say that it is not perhaps desirable also. Okay, it is not perhaps desirable to have the absolute equality in society. So he is not someone who stands for absolute equality. But yes, he takes care of this egalitarian aspect by introducing this difference principle, whereby the welfare of the most disadvantaged section of society has been taken care of. Something which was missed by procedural conception of justice, and by all means by the utilitarian conception of justice. Okay, utilitarian conception of justice does not, although going beyond individuals' rights or the preoccupation with individual rights, is not able to take care of those who may be the most disadvantaged because they constitute the minority. Okay. So this is the enrichment. Now understand that it is not just about theory of justice that was published in 1971. So when he elaborates these principles of justice in his book Theory of Justice, which published in 1971, he faces the criticism from various quarters. Okay, so he will face the criticism from neoliberals, he will face the criticism from communitarians, then after that social liberals, and the one particular school of thought which is actually directly relevant in our syllabus is communitarian critic. And there you get to study about communitarian critic that has been offered by Sandel, Walger, Taylor, and many others. And there you needed to discuss that communitarian critic in the next paragraph. Okay, so Sandel's view that how he opposes Rawls in conception of individual, Rawls in conception of good. Okay, how he says that identities or goals in the society are not something that individual chooses but comes to know about. Okay, goals are not something that individuals choose on their own. They come to recognize it. Okay, and the same thing, that is, an individual is an embedded self, is not an encumbered self. So, though same criticism you will talk about, but the question is about enrichment. Getting it? So it is actually the response that Rawls gives in his next very important book, that is Political Liberalism, that was published in the year 1993. So 1971 में Theory of Justice published हुआ था. and Political Liberalism was published in 1993. So in 1993, when he publishes this Political Liberalism, this was in response to the criticism that was made by communitarians. Okay, now in his book Political Liberalism, he accepts most of the claims, but again focus on the demand of the question, that how he is enriching the idea of justice. Okay, while accepting his criticism that has come from communitarian camp, Rawls further enriches the idea. Okay, now one thing is this, that while he comes with his theory of justice, elaborating on the principles of liberty and equality, which also includes difference principle to be applied in lexical order, he also talks of something called reflexive equilibrium. Okay, and this reflexive equilibrium again is an enrichment, because understand that this is precisely the point whereby Rawls differs from other thinkers and philosophers who have talked about justice, for example, Plato, for example, Aristotle. Okay, because there, Rawls is ready to make all the corrections that are required in the principles of justice, so that finally the principle that exists outside is able to comport well with our intuitive idea of justice. Okay, and in the idea of reflexive equilibrium, which it is expected that you must be knowing when you are answering this question, you have to show that how that is an enrichment. Okay, you have to show that how Rawls is ready to bring the intuitive conception, the inner self that subscribes to a conception of justice, comparing it with some principle which lies outside, and moving back and forth to make corrections either in the principle or in inner self, to finally arrive at a principle of justice which comports well with one's inner self. Okay, so that is a reflexive equilibrium. But just to answer the communitarians who have criticized his theory, he responds by introducing some other ideas. So, for example, one idea was reasonable pluralism. And overlapping consensus. Okay, so there, as I said, that Rawls accepts most of the criticism of communitarians, but is still in Political Liberalism, in his second important book, he does not change those principles of justice. He does not change the three principles that he has elaborated. And he says that, yes, it is very much understandable that in a plural, diverse society, people will be having various comprehensive doctrines. These comprehensive doctrines may be liberalism or some other kind of doctrines. Okay, the world views. Comprehensive doctrines means world views, which apply to every sphere of life. And still, they will be having certain commonality which arise out of the reason that human beings are endowed with when it comes to political conception of justice. So people, even while subscribing to different comprehensive doctrines, different world views that they might be having in other sphere of life, because they are reasonable, they will be able to develop a consensus on the political conception of justice. And these principles of justice that he has elaborated upon are not to be applied in every sphere of human life. They are to be applied for those institutions which seek to bring about fairness in economic and political sphere. Okay, so this is what he is saying in response to communitarians. Now, every single term that I'm using require elaboration, and that is something that I'm going to keep in a separate discussion where I'm going to deep dive into the concepts of PSIR. But here my attempt is to help you to understand the demand of the question and then provide you the direction how you should have approached this question. Okay, so understand many candidates will be writing in the same language, using the same terms. Now these are not the terms that are new to you. Okay, I'm just saying that how you would have arranged this, in which every single paragraph that you would have written would have been in response to the question that has been asked. Okay, to show that how that is the enrichment. The language, the ordering of the arguments, that should be in that direction. Okay, so reasonable pluralism and overlapping consensus. And Rawls claimed that how his idea of justice is not a comprehensive doctrine, but is very much a political conception to be applied by institutions. And there he also talks about the distinction that needs to be made about social facts and various kinds of miseries that prevail in society, which many times wrongly are claimed to be unjust. So for example, one is disabled, the other is poor. All these claims have been made, and there Rawls says that these are just social facts. Okay. Now, what actually matters is, and what actually will determine whether the system is just or not, is the question that how institutions deal with those social facts. So how institutions are to be they are to be dealt with by the institutions, how those social facts are to be dealt with, to be resolved by institutions. For that, he has elaborated on principles of justice. So this is something which definitely is a good idea. And there lies, you can say, the contribution or the enrichment of Rawls. Okay. Now, it is precisely this particular conception or this particular understanding that I think now it is clear to you, for which it is called that the Rawlsian conception of justice is purely procedural. And while many other thinkers, for example, Ambedkar, has been providing or has been professing for some conception of justice which are more egalitarian, or you can say they are more relevant with respect to that aspect of society which requires social engineering, okay, to deliver social justice. Okay, so but that is a question that they asked in the year 2022. So I'll discuss that also. Okay, this is one question, and in the same series I'm going to discuss the other. Okay, so this was all, and understand that here we have focused more on the approach than the content. Okay. Now, there needs to be another discussion with respect to what is overlapping consensus, what is reasonable pluralism, what is Rawlsian conception of justice, what are the three principles and how they are to be applied in lexical order. So that needs a separate discussion. We will have that also. Okay. Thank you.